Hello, welcome to Handy English for Teachers by Teacher Oscar. This is Teacher Oscar, and in today's video, we're going to talk about language learning and language acquisition. Okay, we're going to go through several contents, through 5 different points of the contents. What is language? Brain functionality, language learning versus language acquisition, theorists and theories, especially on Noam Chomsky and Stephen Krashen, and finally the application in our teaching practice in the classroom. Before we continue, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, to give a like to the video, to share it with your acquaintances and friends, and of course, do not forget to check the content in the description of the video if you would like to know more about the preparation course for the Ceneval exam EGAL EIN for Licenciatura en enseñanza del inglés. And well, in general, if you would like to know more about teaching our language teaching practice, do not forget to watch the rest of my content. Okay, with no further ado, let us start. Language learning versus language acquisition. Firstly, we're going to talk about what is language. Let me tell you the definition that I'm showing you here in the slides. It's taken from a book by George Jules, one of the articles that is referenced in the official Ceneval study guide. Basically, what George Jules says about a language is that language is that ability that we humans have, the method that we use to communicate with each other by the use of words, which gives us the characteristic of human beings, as no other animal on the planet will use words to communicate. So, language is basically the communication attribute through words of human beings. All right? And well, that is the definition of language. But what happens in our brains? This is the brain functionalities. What are the parts of our brain that produce the language to happen? Okay, there are two areas in our brain that are on the left lobe of our brain. Two main areas, which are called the Broca area and the Wernicke area, due or named after some neuropsychologists, which made some studies on neurolinguistics. All right, so Broca area, which you can see it here on the slide, is basically the one in charge of producing coherent speech so that when we speak, our speech is understood properly by the other people. And the Wernicke area, which is in the back part on the front, on the left lobe of our brain, this is the Wernicke area. This area is in charge of processing and understanding our speech in our language. Okay, so basically we need these two sides on our left parietal lobe of our brain to produce the language. Then we're going to talk about language learning versus language acquisition. Both Broca and Wernicke area are in charge of acquire and learn the language. This is the main topic, so let's take a look at this. Let me tell you that language acquisition normally naturally happens when we are born and when we receive the language from our parents. Okay, our native language, we acquired it. If we speak a second language, it might have been that we have possibly acquired it as well or learned it. But let's take a look at what the differences are. Language acquisition comes in a natural way. That's what happens when we acquire our native language. It's personal. It's through our own experience. The priority of this factor, of this part of acquired a language, is in the spoken production. Okay, we need to practice the language in use. We need to use the language to communicate, and therefore it's going to be meaningful for our interaction. In order to learn it, we do it through an inductive coaching. You know, when our parents are correcting our language, they are not telling us that we made a grammar mistake when we're babies. They're just correcting our pronunciation or trying us to say the word properly. Okay, so that's inductive coaching. It is a subconscious process. We are not aware that this is happening in our brain. It's subconscious. It's just happening through the everyday life. It is learner centered activities with room for improvisation. In this case, this particular point is regarding the teaching practice. In the classroom, you need to center, if you want your students to acquire a second language, you need to produce activities that create the environment of exposure of a second language. There is no translation from the L1. And the activities, all the activities you do in the teaching practice, if you want your students to acquire a language, have to be in the language, never in the native language of a learner. Okay, its main focus is on communication, and it produces an ability. Okay, it produces an ability of a natural speaking ability of communication. This is acquisition. But then let's take a look at the part of learning. Learning means artificial, meaning it is not natural because we know that we are doing it. We are conscious on the process of learning the language. It is technical because we are learning about the rules, the structures, the strategies, etc. Its priority it's on the written language because we're going to perform the written ability, right? Plus the other abilities as well. But the writing ability is going to be really important. It's going to play an important role in the process of learning the language. Okay, there is theory. We learn theory. There is a language analysis. Sometimes we compare our L1 to our L2. And there is formal instruction. We need somebody to be guiding us through the process of learning. This is deductive teaching. In the teaching practice, you are having students to deduct the meanings. You give them rules. You teach them from the easiest to the most complex topics from top down, and you are giving them the topics one by one. It is a conscious process. There is a preset syllabus already made, which means all the contents that you are going to provide to the student. All right, there is or there might be translation and the use of their native language included because sometimes you need to explain some terms, and in order to do so, you need to compare from the L1 to the L2. The activities are about the language. What's the difference? That I'm going to explain about the rules of a language, right? The present simple, the present continuous, etc. In language acquisition, we do not do that. It's like acquiring our native language. We do not explain rules. Okay, its focus on language learning, the main focus is on the form, on the accuracy of a language, on grammar, spelling, and pronunciation, all the rest of the subabilities of a language. And it finally produces knowledge more than an ability. So you know about the language, and many people can learn a language and do not speak it or do not use it, but they know about it, right? So it produces knowledge, not an ability. So this is basically the difference between language acquisition and language learning. Now, there are theorists and theories. Let us start with Noam Chomsky, which, by the way, I made a video about this specific theory, the universal grammar, that you can check on the channel about specifically on Noam Chomsky. The universal grammar theory basically suggests that all human beings are born with the innate ability to produce the language with the proper grammar or with the correct grammar structures, depending on the place where they are born and the environment and all the natural things that need to happen for us to start speaking. Okay, so it says here, if the basic grammar laws are the same for all languages, which is one of the main points of bullet points of universal grammar theories, that all languages share the same basis, then a child needs only to follow the particular set of rules of that language, and then he will naturally start developing the proper grammar of the language. So this is what Noam Chomsky said on his universal grammar theory. But then we have this other guy, Stephen Krashen, and his natural order hypothesis. Basically, what he says is that the natural order argues that the acquisition of grammatical structures occurs in a predictable sequence, meaning that when a child is born and is exposed to a second language, he's going to start producing the language in a natural way because of the same point, and it is attached to the universal grammar. If we share the same rules of language, then naturally we are going to naturally start speaking the proper grammar rules of the second language that we are acquiring. Okay, so this is the natural order hypothesis. Okay, I'm just giving you an overview on the theories, and I will recommend you to investigate more about Stephen Krashen and Noam Chomsky. Basically, and in order to finish, and I hope that this video has been useful for you, the application in the classroom. If we know now that language acquisition and language learning are two different things, we need to decide what we want our students to do, to acquire a language or to learn a language. It will depend on the context that we have, on the kind of students, and on the motivation of our students to learn the second language, which in this case will be English. Okay, so dear teacher, when applying your best teaching strategies, don't forget that your students are going through a cognitive process in which their brains are doing all the work for their own learning. So, we, the teachers, are the guides, facilitators, supervisors of learning processes. Then, we must lead our students to acquire the language rather than only learn it. Okay, so thank you very much. This was Teacher Oscar. I hope you have liked this video. And if you would like to know more about the preparation course, if you would like to know more about the Ceneval exam, and if you want to know more about these type of topics, leave a comment below, and we're seeing each other in our next video. Thank you very much. See you next time.